In this video, I review the factors influencing food demand and how they're tied to broad variables in the economy. Understanding the drivers of food consumption decisions is a critical step in building a strategic plan that accounts for fluctuations in the economic environment. The food supply chain accounts for around 7% of the overall economic activity in Canada when measured by the gross domestic product, or GDP. I've heard multiple times that food is a sector immune to economic fluctuations or that it's recession-proof, because after all, we all need to eat. At a very high level, there's some truth to this. We're fortunate to have access to a stable and high-quality food supply in Canada. Some segments of the population unfortunately deal with food insecurities. Consumers in Canada spend one of the smallest shares of disposable income on food purchases among all Western economies. Yet when we look at the economic environment from an individual business standpoint, food and beverage manufacturers are not isolated from economic fluctuations. Food demand is mainly influenced by four broad factors: population, food preferences, prices of various food products, and income. The first factor, population growth, is obvious. A growing population implies a larger demand for food. The demand for specific types of food is also influenced by consumer attitudes, values, culture, other personal characteristics. Processors need to understand how the demand for the food they produce is connected to these different population characteristics. Let's now consider food prices. A product demand is inversely related to its price. That's what we call the law of demand. The higher the price, the fewer units consumers will want to buy. And vice versa, the lower the price, the more units buyers will want to purchase. Food product demand is generally considered inelastic because a change in the product price triggers a less than proportional change in the quantity consumed. Even if the demand for the products you sell is inelastic, buyers don't make purchasing decisions in silos. Prices of competing products matter. This is referred to as the degree of substitution between products. Some products have a high potential for substitution, think for example of beef and pork, while others are not so much, for example beef versus vegetables. Consider the broad economic indicator of inflation. It measures the rate at which prices of goods and services in the economy rise and provides an idea of the erosion in consumers' purchasing power. But not all prices that consumers face evolve at the same pace. Let's look at the inflation picture in August of 2023. The overall rate of inflation consumers faced at the time was 4%. Annual inflation in grocery stores was higher at 6.9%. But the underlying products in the food basket all showed various degrees of inflation. Beef inflation was measured at 11.9%, while pork recorded a negative inflation rate, meaning that average retail pork prices were lower than 12 months ago. Comparing how prices fare at the retail level for the products you sell versus the competing products can explain trends in consumption. The food inflation chart is a picture of a given point in time. Understanding long-run consumption trends driven by inflation would require tracking food prices over a longer period. From a consumer's perspective, sustained price increases may lead to a decline in consumption, especially if the inflation rate of the product exceeds the general food inflation rate. Another factor influencing food demand is income. It's difficult to track the evolution of consumer income month to month. Some useful indicators are found in the labor market, however. For example, workers' total pay is tied to disposable income. Pay increases gained momentum in the early days of the pandemic as businesses looked to compensate workers for various new conditions in their employment. This rate of growth essentially came down to zero in the spring of 2021. In a tight labor market, post-pandemic, coupled with broad inflationary pressures, have lifted the rate of compensation increases in 2023. It's also useful to monitor a broad economic indicator of the economy's health, such as GDP, which represents the total dollar value of all goods and services produced over a specific period. Consumption is the largest component of GDP in Canada at 55% of GDP. We normally monitor real GDP growth to understand the trend in the overall economic performance of a country. The term real means that we remove the effect of inflation on GDP to focus on the economic output in the economy. A gain in real GDP points to a strengthening economy. Real GDP can also fall, and economists usually say then that the economy is slowing down or is in a recession. GDP is not a perfect measure of consumer income because it accounts not only for consumption spending but also for business investment, government spending, and the net impact of trade. but there's a positive relationship between GDP growth and the rate of workers' compensation. And there's a positive relationship as well between workers' compensation or income and food purchases. A growing economy can lead to changes in food purchasing habits. For example, consumers buy more of their food from food service providers, such as restaurants, instead of grocery stores. Economic challenges reflected by a slower growth in GDP can lead consumers to scale back purchases of certain types of food or buy food products of lower quality to stretch the value of their food dollar. The bottom line is that food and beverage manufacturers are not isolated from economic fluctuations. Understanding the evolution of broad economic variables is useful for making projections about food consumption patterns and sales, and is a valuable part of a strategic plan. Looking for more economic insights and expertise? Find tools and resources to help you manage your food and beverage business at FCC Knowledge.